Wesley Barnes was 30 minutes past closing, standing in the back of a dingy pizza shop, staring at the last delivery slip with a sigh that came from somewhere deep in his bones. "Can you take this one, Wes?" the kid behind the counter asked, already halfway out the door. "It's in Midtown, big order, tipped in cash." Wesley glanced at the address, some sleek high-rise he couldn't afford to look at, let alone live in. He wiped his hands on his jeans, grabbed his jacket, and picked up the insulated bag. "Fine," he muttered. "But after this, I'm done for the night." He didn't have time for this, not with rent overdue, bills stacked on his kitchen table, and a 6-year-old at home with a babysitter he could barely afford. But cash was cash, and he needed every extra dollar he could scrape together. He pulled up to the building in his beat-up Honda, staring up at the massive glass tower that practically sparkled against the night sky. The doorman barely looked at him as he nodded him in, giving him a once-over like he didn't belong. He didn't. But he took the elevator to the 34th floor and stepped into a completely different world. The hallway was silent, carpeted, and smelled like money. He rang the bell. The door opened almost instantly. And there she was. Dark hair pulled into a loose bun, a silk robe tied at the waist, bare feet on polished marble. Her eyes landed on him wide, curious, and just a little surprised. "Hi," she said softly, her voice low and smooth. "You're late." "Yeah," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Sorry, got slammed." "Here's your order." He handed it over, trying not to stare at the giant chandelier behind her or the floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the skyline. She tilted her head, watching him. "You okay?" He blinked. "What? You look tired," he laughed once. "Yeah, well. Single dad life." Her expression shifted, softer. "You have a kid?" "Yeah, my daughter Ellery, she's 6, bossy as hell, smarter than me too." That made her smile. "Sounds like my kind of girl." He couldn't help it, he smiled back. Something about her didn't match the penthouse. She didn't act like the kind of woman who lived up here. She wasn't cold, she wasn't fake, and she was looking at him like she saw every inch of him, and didn't mind what she saw. "I'm Dakota Fields," she said, stepping back. "Want to come in for a second? I haven't eaten all day." "Wouldn't mind sharing," he hesitated. "I don't think it's just pizza," she cut in. "I don't bite, and I tip better when I'm in a good mood." That last part made him laugh. "All right, 5 minutes." He stepped inside, and yeah, it was just pizza. But 5 minutes turned into 10, and 10 turned into 40, and suddenly they were sitting across from each other on her kitchen stools, laughing over a story about Ellery flushing Wesley's phone down the toilet because it was being mean. Dakota was something else, funny, sharp. Beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or designer robes. She listened. Really listened. And when she laughed, she threw her head back and clapped her hand over her chest like she meant it. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "What did you expect?" He shrugged. "Someone rich, rude, detached." "Well, 2 out of 3 isn't bad," she teased, sipping her wine. He raised an eyebrow. "So you are rich," she just smiled. "Let's just say I handle a lot of meetings." He didn't push. Eventually, he stood. "I should go." "Ellery's probably giving her sitter a hard time." Dakota walked him to the door. "Thanks for the company, Wesley." He looked at her for a beat longer than he should have. "Yeah, you too." As the elevator doors closed, he let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. That wasn't just a delivery, that was different. He didn't expect to see her again, but 3 nights later, her name popped up on the delivery board again, same floor, same address. He stared at the slip, heart pounding. "You want me to take this one too?" the manager asked. Wesley reached for the bag without a word. Dakota had ordered the same pizza. But this time she had wine glasses out already. "You're late again," she teased as he stepped in. "I figured you'd be disappointed if I wasn't," she grinned. "Sit down, Wesley." He did. They talked again. This time about books, movies. Her past vague mentions of growing up in Chicago, being raised by a single mom who worked 3 jobs. Nothing about her job, nothing about the money. He didn't ask why she kept ordering pizza when she clearly had access to anything she wanted. And when he stood to leave, she touched his arm. "Same time next week?" she asked. He looked at her, and something shifted in his chest. "Yeah," he said. "Same time." It became a routine. Once a week, sometimes twice, Dakota ordered pizza at odd hours. And Wesley delivered it, even when he wasn't on the schedule. They talked for hours about Ellery, about life, about things he hadn't said out loud to anyone in years. She asked about his ex and he told her the truth. Walked out when Ellery was 4. No word since. "You ever think about dating again?" she asked one night. He looked at her, then smiled. "I don't really have time to think about things like that," she nodded slowly. "Maybe you should." That night when he left, he leaned in without thinking and kissed her cheek. She didn't pull away. 3 weeks later, he showed up with Ellery in the car. His sitter canceled last minute, and he didn't have a choice. "I'll wait outside," he told Dakota quickly, embarrassed. "I didn't want to cancel, but don't be ridiculous," she said, opening the door wider. "Bring her in. Really, Wesley, I want to meet her." Ellery was cautious at first, clutching his hand tight, but Dakota knelt down, eye level, and offered her a slice of pizza and a twinkle in her eye. Within 30 minutes, Ellery was curled up on her couch, watching cartoons while Dakota sat beside Wesley at the kitchen island. "She's amazing," Dakota whispered. "She's my whole world." Dakota looked at him. "You're a good dad," he swallowed hard. "I try." She reached for his hand. "Wesley," he looked up. "I like you," he blinked. Yeah, he didn't think. He leaned in and kissed her, and this time she kissed him back. Wesley didn't know what surprised him more, that Dakota kissed him back, or that the next morning, she called and asked if he and Ellery wanted to come with her to the botanical garden. He stood in the middle of his cramped kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, watching Ellery stir cereal with a plastic spoon. "You want to go with us?" he asked cautiously. "No," she said. "I want to go with you, and I figured Ellery would love the butterfly dome. But only if you're both okay with it." He glanced at his daughter, who was now humming the theme song to some animated show about magical hamsters. "She's never seen butterflies up close," he said. "Then let's change that." They met Dakota outside the entrance just after 11. She wasn't wearing silk robes or heels this time, just jeans, white sneakers, and a soft lavender sweater that made her look younger. Less polished. Wesley's chest tightened when she knelt down and offered Ellery a purple sun hat with glittery butterflies stitched across the brim. "Figured a butterfly explorer needs the right gear," she said with a wink. Ellery lit up. "Can I keep it?" "That's the idea." They wandered through the gardens for hours. Ellery darted between flowers and fountains, dragging Wesley's hand as she peppered Dakota with questions about everything from pollination to how long butterflies lived. Dakota answered with surprising detail, even crouched beside a flower to explain how a proboscis worked. Wesley leaned against a stone railing and watched her. "You studied this stuff?" he asked when they were alone for a moment. "I was going to be a biologist," she said. "Before I wasn't." "What happened?" "My mom got sick senior year. I had to start working." "Got pulled into a company internship and never left the corporate world," he nodded. "You're good with her." "I like kids," she said, "but I've never met one like her. She's got a spark." He smiled faintly. "She gets that from her mom." Dakota looked at him then. "Do you still love her?" He paused, surprised by the directness. "No," he said, "but I don't regret what we had. Ellery came out of it. That makes it worth something." They didn't push further. Instead, they watched Ellery coax a butterfly onto her fingertip, her eyes wide with wonder. And when she looked up and whispered, "Dad, look," Wesley felt something stir in his chest that had nothing to do with butterflies. That night, as he tucked Ellery into bed, she blinked up at him. "Dakota's nice," she said sleepily. "Will she come again?" Wesley ran his hand through her hair. "Only if you want her to." "I do," she murmured. "She listens." He kissed her forehead and turned out the light, heart heavier than it should have been. The next morning, he dropped off a pizza order on the far side of the city. It was a small, forgettable delivery, but it put him near Dakota's building. He hesitated at the intersection, foot hovering above the brake. She hadn't called. He turned left, back at the shop. His manager flagged him down. "Hey, Wes, got a weird request. Some lady called and asked for you by name, said it was important." He took the slip, recognizing the address instantly. But this time, it wasn't for pizza, it was blank. He rode the elevator up with his cap tucked low, heart beating faster with every floor. When the doors opened, Dakota was already waiting in the hallway, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. "You didn't answer your phone," she said. "I was working." "I didn't order anything." "I know," she stepped aside. "Come in anyway." The apartment was dim, curtains drawn. A tray of untouched food sat on the counter. "You okay?" he asked. She exhaled. "My assistant leaked something. The press found out I've been entertaining a pizza delivery man." She didn't say it cruelly, just with a kind of hollow resignation. He stood still. "And now you're what, calling it off?" Her eyes snapped to his. "No, I'm telling you because I want you to know before it hits the papers. They'll twist it, make it sound cheap, like I'm chasing some fantasy." He crossed the room slowly. "Are you?" She blinked. "What? Chasing a fantasy?" Her mouth parted for half a second. "No, I think I'm chasing something real." He closed the distance between them. "Then let him talk." Dakota reached for his wrist, holding it like she was afraid he'd vanish. "It's not just me, you have a daughter. You should decide if this is worth dragging her into." Wesley looked down at her fingers against his skin. "Ellery already asked if she'd see you again." Her eyes filled just slightly. "You matter to her," he said. "And to me." She stepped forward, resting her forehead against his chest. "I don't care what they say, but I care what happens to the people I let in." He wrapped his arms around her. "Then don't shut me out." She didn't. Over the next week, the story exploded. Blogs speculated. Headlines screamed. Photos of them walking beside each other at the botanical garden were splashed across gossip sites. One of him holding Ellery's hand while Dakota knelt to tie her shoe became the centerpiece of a viral debate about power imbalance and modern fairy tales. He didn't read the comments. But Dakota's office called. Her board was concerned. Investors were curious. Her assistant disappeared. One evening, she called him from the back of a black car, voice tight. "They want me to issue a statement." "What kind of statement?" "That we're friends, that I'm mentoring you." "That there's no," her voice caught for the briefest moment, "romantic involvement." He didn't say anything. "Wesley, I get it, you don't." "I do," he said flatly. "You're protecting everything you built. You think this is easy for me." "I think you're scared," he said quietly. "And I don't blame you, but don't ask me to disappear so you can tidy up the narrative." Silence. Then, finally, "I'm not asking that." He waited. "I'm asking you to stand still, just for a little while. Let me fix this." He didn't want to. Every part of him hated the idea of her downplaying what they were. But the way her voice cracked on the last word told him this wasn't a choice for her, it was survival. "All right," he said. "But don't take too long." "I won't." The next time he saw her, 2 days later, she was standing in the rain outside his apartment building, soaked through, mascara streaked, holding a crumpled newspaper. "I quit," she said, laughing through a sob. "What?" "I resigned from the board. Sold my shares. They can keep their legacy. I want my life back. I want you." He reached out, pulling her under the awning, hands in her wet hair, breath warm as she clung to his shirt. "You're crazy," he whispered. "For you," she said. And when he kissed her, it wasn't cautious or sweet, it was full of everything they'd been holding back. Inside, Ellery peeked from the window, her face pressed to the glass. When Wesley carried Dakota upstairs, dripping and laughing, his daughter just grinned. "She came back," she said. Wesley nodded. "Yeah, she did." The first time Wesley saw Dakota's new place, it was nothing like her penthouse. She had rented a 2-bedroom apartment on the Upper East Side, modest by her standards, but still nicer than anything he'd ever lived in. Gone were the marble floors and skyline views. The new space had warm wooden floors, light streaming in through wide windows, and a faint smell of citrus from a candle flickering on the counter. "I wanted something quieter," she said as she handed him a cup of coffee. "Somewhere nobody would expect me to be." Wesley took the cup, eyeing the shelf filled with books and a few framed photos he hadn't seen before. One showed her with a woman who had her same eyes and a tired smile. He guessed that was her mother. Another was a candid shot of Dakota standing beside a whiteboard, laughing in a room full of men in suits. "You miss it?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned against the kitchen counter, watching the steam rise from her mug. "I thought I would," she said finally. "But no. What I miss is feeling like I'm doing something that matters. I spent 10 years proving I could run with people who never wanted me there in the first place. It never felt like mine." "You could start something new," he said. "Something that is." She looked at him with a kind of quiet surprise, like the idea hadn't fully occurred to her. "You think anyone would take me seriously now?" "I'd take you seriously," he said. But if you want the truth, people already do. They just don't matter as much as you think. She didn't argue. Instead, she walked over to the table and pulled out a folder. I've been drafting a proposal, she said. A consulting firm. Focused on helping women navigate corporate spaces without losing themselves in the process. He opened the folder, flipping through hand-sketched logos and bullet-pointed strategies. This is good, he said. Like really good. I could use someone with people instincts. Someone who knows how to deal with problems that don't come with a manual. You offering me a job? His lips twitched. I'm offering you a seat at the table, she said. If you want it. He closed the folder, looked at her, and said, let's build something better. The next few weeks blurred together. Dakota dove into her plans with the kind of focus that made Wesley dizzy. She rented a small office space in Chelsea, painted the walls herself, and brought Ellery along one Saturday to help pick out furniture. Ellery chose a bright yellow armchair for the lobby and declared it the thinking chair, which Dakota immediately bought without hesitation. Wesley started helping with client outreach, something he never thought he'd be good at, until Dakota handed him a list of names with a raised eyebrow and said, "You're more persuasive than you think." She was right. People listened to him. More than that, they responded to him. It wasn't always easy. Dakota had to fight off investors who wanted to control the narrative. Wesley had to juggle deliveries until they could afford to pull him in full time. There were late nights, tense silences, and moments of doubt neither of them said out loud. But there were also lunches on the office floor. Ellery curled up in the yellow chair with crayons, the three of them planning out a future none of them had seen coming. One night, Dakota stood on the fire escape of her new apartment, the city humming quietly beneath her, when Wesley stepped beside her and handed her a glass of lemonade. "No wine tonight," she asked. "I figured you needed something real." She sipped it slowly. "You always know what I need before I do. I pay attention." She turned to look at him, the streetlights catching the edge of her profile. "Can I tell you something you might not like?" she asked. He nodded. "I'm scared," she said. "Not of the business, not of failing. I'm scared of what happens if I let myself want this too much." "This?" he asked. "Or me?" "Both." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he set his glass down and took hers from her hands, placing it beside his. Then he pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist, his voice low against her ear. "You don't have to be brave all the time, Dakota." She rested her head against his shoulder. "But what if I mess this up? Then we figure it out, together." She didn't cry. Dakota Fields wasn't the kind of woman who cried easily. But she held on to him like he was the only thing that made sense in a world that had never made space for her softness. Wesley didn't ask her to move in, and she didn't ask him to stop delivering pizzas. They were still figuring it out. But they spent more nights together than apart. Ellery had her own drawer of toys in Dakota's apartment, and Dakota had started learning how to braid hair badly at first, but getting better. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching Ellery build a pillow fort, Dakota turned to him. "My mother would have liked you." He looked over, surprised. "You never talk about her. She passed away 2 years ago, lung cancer. She didn't smoke a day in her life." He reached for her hand. "She worked housekeeping at a hotel for 20 years, raised me by herself. She used to tell me, 'You don't owe anyone your silence.' I think about that a lot lately." "She was smart," he said. "She was tired," she replied, "but she kept going." They sat in silence for a while, watching Ellery try to secure a blanket with a plastic tiara. "I want to name the firm after her," Dakota said. "Rosa Consulting," he nodded. "That sounds right." The next morning, Dakota met with a potential client, her first major pitch under the new company name. She wore a navy blazer and a simple silver necklace, nothing flashy. Wesley waited outside, pacing, until she came out with a grin that told him everything he needed to know. She signed. He hugged her tight, lifting her briefly off the ground as she laughed into his shoulder. "We're really doing this," she whispered. "Yeah," he said. "We are." That night, they celebrated in the most extravagant way they could afford, takeout from a Thai place around the corner, eaten on Dakota's living room floor with Ellery asleep in the yellow chair. As the city buzzed beyond the windows, Dakota leaned her head against Wesley's chest, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never felt this free before." He kissed the top of her head. Welcome home. The first time Wesley stepped into the ballroom at the Hartley Foundation's annual Winter Gala, he wasn't carrying a pizza box, he was wearing a tailored charcoal suit Dakota had insisted on buying for him, his fingers nervously adjusting the cuffs as he tried to ignore the weight of 1,000 eyes. Dakota, standing beside him in a deep midnight blue gown that shimmered as she moved, leaned in without looking away from the crowd. You're doing fine, he glanced at her. I feel like I'm about to announce the wrong winner at a film awards show. You're not even presenting, still feels dangerous. She reached for his hand beneath the table. You belong here, he didn't say anything. Not because he didn't believe her, he did, more and more each day, but because the room was filled with people who used to be her peers. Former board members, journalists, executives who had once whispered behind her back and now pretended they hadn't. He'd expected her to be tense, maybe even bitter. But Dakota stood tall, chin high, her expression unreadable as she accepted greetings with a grace that bordered on regal. She introduced Wesley as her partner, not her boyfriend, not the man she was dating, her partner. I heard you're launching something new, one woman said, swirling her champagne as she gave Dakota a curious once-over. I did, Dakota replied. It's already profitable. Wesley watched the woman's expression flatten in a way that said she'd hoped for the opposite. And who's this? The woman asked, turning to him with a polite smile. Wesley Barnes, Dakota said before he could speak. Co-founder of Rosa Consulting. The woman blinked. Oh, Wesley didn't flinch. Nice to meet you. After she walked away, Dakota leaned over. You handled that better than I would have, he exhaled. I've had practice dealing with people who assume things. Later in the evening, a man with silver hair and a voice that carried across the room approached their table. Dakota's posture stiffened before she rose to greet him. Malcolm, she said, her tone cold but civil. Dakota, he gave a brief nod. I see you're back in circulation. I wasn't aware I left. Your departure from the firm was abrupt. I didn't realize I owed you a farewell note. Malcolm's gaze flicked to Wesley. And this must be the reason. Wesley stood slowly, his expression calm. The reason she left was because she outgrew a room full of people who never expected her to speak. Malcolm's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. After a long moment, he turned and walked away. Dakota turned to Wesley, her voice low. You didn't have to do that. I know, he said. But I wanted to. That night, after the gala, they didn't go back to her apartment. Instead, they stopped by the new office still partially furnished, but lit softly by the lamps they'd picked out together. She kicked off her heels and curled up on the couch while he loosened his tie and sat beside her. I would have folded if you weren't there tonight, she said, staring up at the ceiling. No, you wouldn't, he said. I'm serious. You kept me grounded. You've never needed anyone to stand your ground for you. She turned her head to look at him. Maybe not, but it's easier when someone's beside you. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Then I'm not going anywhere. A week later, Ellery came home from school with a crayon drawing of their family, Dakota, Wesley, and herself, all holding hands in front of a building labeled Rosa. Dakota stared at it for a long time before taping it to the fridge. That weekend, Wesley took them both upstate for a break from the city. They stayed in a small cabin near a frozen lake, roasted marshmallows over a fire, and watched Ellery chase snowflakes with a knitted scarf wrapped twice around her neck. One night, after Ellery had fallen asleep beside a pile of books in the loft, Dakota stepped out onto the porch wrapped in a quilt. Wesley joined her, slipping his arm around her shoulders. She asked me today if I was her stepmom, Dakota said softly. What did you say? I told her not yet. Wesley looked at her, the cold air biting at his skin, his breath visible between them. You want to be? Her answer came without hesitation. Yes. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box, not velvet, not flashy. Just simple, dark wood, worn smooth from where his fingers had rubbed against it for days. Dakota froze. I didn't plan to ask you here, he said. I thought I'd wait, do something big and dramatic, but then I realized. We've already had the press scandals and the rooftop kisses and the ballroom showdowns. What we haven't had is something quiet, something just for us. He opened the box. Inside was a ring with a single sapphire, deep and clear. I love you, he said. And not because you gave me a place in your world, because you let me build one with you. Will you marry me? Dakota didn't cry, but her voice trembled when she said, "Ask me again so I know I didn't imagine it." He smiled. "Will you marry me?" Yes. They didn't rush the wedding. They spent the spring building Rosa consulting into something that no longer needed explaining. By summer, they had a growing client list, 2 interns, and a waiting room filled with women who'd read about Dakota's story and wanted her guidance. The wedding happened in September. It wasn't in a ballroom or a cathedral, it was in a garden behind the cabin upstate, with Ellery tossing flower petals and insisting they repeat their vows, because she liked the part where they said, "forever." Wesley wore the same suit from the gala. Dakota wore a dress that didn't shimmer, didn't sparkle, but moved like water when she walked. After the ceremony, they cut the cake with Ellery's help, then danced on the grass under strings of lights that flickered like stars. Dakota's hands never left Wesley's shoulders and his eyes never left her face. "I never imagined this," she said quietly. "Neither did I," he replied. "But somehow it feels like we've had it all along." When the music faded and the guests drifted away, they stood beneath the trees, the air warm and still. "I'm not running anymore," Dakota whispered. Wesley pulled her close. "Neither am I." They didn't need the city lights or the headlines. They'd built something stronger than all of it. And this time, it wasn't about what they'd left behind. It was about everything they had finally, fully found. 6 months after the wedding, Rosa Consulting had outgrown the modest Chelsea office and moved into a larger, sunlit space on the edge of Soho. The new office had exposed brick walls and a rooftop terrace. Dakota had fallen in love with the moment she saw it. Wesley had insisted on adding a small playroom near the back, complete with beanbags, a chalkboard wall, and a bookshelf Ellery had personally curated. "I don't know how you convinced the landlord to let us paint the walls," Dakota said one afternoon, watching Ellery draw a sprawling city skyline in pastel chalk. "I told him it was for the CEO's daughter," Wesley replied, setting down a box of new client packets. "He said no at first, then I offered to repaint it myself when we leave." "Did you mean it?" "I figured if we ever leave this place, we'll be too successful to care about a few coats of paint." Dakota walked over and kissed him lightly. "That's dangerously optimistic. I've learned from the best. As their business grew, so did their rhythm." Dakota handled strategy and client development, while Wesley took charge of operations and outreach. Their strengths balanced each other, but more importantly, they trusted each other's instincts without question. The firm had already been featured in 2 major business journals, not because of its flash, but because of its results. One Friday evening, after clearing her inbox, Dakota leaned back in her chair and watched Wesley across the room. He was crouched near Ellery, showing her how to fold a paper airplane from one of the printer scraps. She stood and crossed to them, kneeling beside Ellery. "I have a question," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's cheek. "Do you remember what you asked me before the wedding?" Ellery squinted. "Which part?" "You asked if I was your stepmom." "Oh yeah, and you said not yet." Dakota turned to Wesley. "What if we stopped calling it not yet?" He looked up, surprised. "You mean, I want to adopt her," Dakota said. "If that's something she wants, and if you do too." Ellery's eyes widened. "You can do that." Wesley stared at Dakota, his voice quiet. "You really want to?" "I love her," she said. "I already feel like her mother. I want to make it real." Ellery threw her arms around Dakota's neck. "I want you to." Wesley blinked against the sudden heat behind his eyes. "Then let's make it official." The process took time. There were court forms, evaluations, and a hearing, but when the judge finally pronounced Dakota Fields as Ellery Barnes' legal mother, all 3 of them stood hand in hand, tears in their eyes. Ellery wore a brand new purple dress and insisted on taking a photo with the judge, who chuckled and obliged. That night, they celebrated with dinner at a quiet family-owned Italian restaurant tucked into the West Village. Ellery got extra gelato, Dakota ordered a bottle of wine that made the waiter do a double take, and Wesley raised his glass with a toast that made them both laugh and cry. "To the family we choose," he said. "And the one we build every day." Ellery clinked her glass of sparkling apple cider against theirs, Spring melted into summer, and the days filled with client meetings, school functions, and quiet evenings at home. Wesley started teaching Ellery how to ride a bike in the park, holding the back of the seat longer than necessary, just to hear her giggle. Dakota began mentoring young women through a local nonprofit, offering guidance she wished someone had given her at 22. One morning, Dakota came downstairs to find Wesley in the kitchen, flipping pancakes with one hand while holding Ellery's lunchbox in the other. "You're wearing socks that don't match," Dakota teased, taking the spatula from him. "It's deliberate, I'm making a statement." "Oh. What statement is that?" "That I can't find anything in the laundry room." She laughed, then stepped behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "We're a mess. We're a beautiful mess," he said. "And I wouldn't change a thing." Later that day, after dropping Ellery off at school, Dakota and Wesley walked hand in hand through the neighborhood, warm coffee cups in their free hands. They paused in front of a corner bookstore that had just opened. "I want to do something," Dakota said. "Is this where you tell me you're opening a second business?" "No," she said. "I want to write something, a book." He stopped walking. Not about what happened, not the scandal or the gossip. "I want to write about the climb, the cost of ambition. The way it can strip you of yourself if you're not careful. I want it to be honest." Wesley looked at her for a long moment. "Then you should write it. You think people would read it?" "I think people need to." She turned and kissed him, right there on the sidewalk, the city buzzing around them. That night, she opened her laptop and began typing. By autumn, the manuscript was finished. By winter, it had a publisher. Dakota didn't tell many people, but the first copy arrived in a plain box one chilly December afternoon. She opened it slowly, fingers trembling. The cover was simple, clean, just her name and the title. More than enough. She handed it to Wesley without a word. He flipped through the pages, then looked up at her. "This is going to change things." "I hope so," she said. "But even if it doesn't, I already have everything I need." They stepped out onto the terrace, the city glowing beneath them, the wind sharp and clean. In the distance, snow began to fall, soft and slow. Wesley pulled her close. "You know," he said, "when I showed up at your door with that first pizza, I thought I was just trying to make rent." She smiled. "And I thought I was just hungry." They stood there in silence, the snow dusting the edges of their coats, the world quiet. Inside, Ellery called out from the living room. "Can we decorate the tree now?" Wesley turned. "We're coming." As they walked back in, Dakota glanced around the apartment, the books on the shelves, the framed photo of Ellery's adoption day, the stack of client portfolios on the coffee table, and the future unfolding with every breath. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was theirs. Forever.